Welcome to the Nerd Journey Podcast. Our goal is to help you, the technology professional, accelerate your career progression, increase your job satisfaction, and be more effective in your existing role.
We want to bring listeners like you the career advice we wish we'd been given earlier in our careers.
I'm John White, at VJourneyman on Twitter, sharing co-host duties with Nick Cordy at NetworkNerd_.
We're two former IT operations guys who have moved on to pre-sales roles with technology vendors. We have our opinions, but we also like to highlight the journeys of others and see what we can learn from them.
We'd also like to ask for your feedback to make this a conversation, not a one-way broadcast. Email us at nerdjourneypodcast@gmail.com or DM us at nerdjourney on Twitter. So come join us on our nerd journey.
Let's take a trip. Episode 331. What are some of the challenges of becoming a team lead? According to Erin O'Quinn, the biggest challenge taking on that role for her was figuring out the best way to communicate with other people. As it turns out, if you want to improve a team's performance, you need to look at how effectively they communicate. Today, Erin is a senior manager of customer advocacy at a sizable tech company, and she's back this week to share part 2 of her story. If you missed part 1 of our discussion with Erin in episode 330, we talked about her emphasis on studying communications and the point at which she discovered how much she enjoyed doing marketing for tech companies. Erin told us about her early experience doing IT support and then supporting events like trade shows. We talked about that openness to learning and her focus on staying a generalist. So this week in part 2, you're going to hear that story of Erin's progression from individual contributor to team lead and people manager. And through the backdrop of that story, we're going to talk about things like how to create a safe space for feedback and ideation where every team member gets a voice. Erin will give us examples of how to give honest, critical feedback in a way that supports someone's growth and doesn't tear them down. And then she'll also tell us a little bit about personal branding. And you'll get to hear the story of how Erin rebuilt her own personal brand during COVID and what that's done to change things for the better. Let's get you to part 2 of our discussion with Erin O'Quinn. I feel like to this point in the conversation, we've talked about a lot of projects that you've taken on and been very successful with, and people continue to give you more of those projects. And in a lot of ways, well, in every way, there was an element of leadership when you're given this thing to go do and your name is on it, because you're going to have to work with other people that don't report to you because you're not their boss, and influence them to help and get this thing accomplished. Whether it's, I need help from this person, I need information from this person, or we need to work together on this thing. Let's explore how you went from individual contributor. I think you were more of like a team lead during this time, right?
I was leading programs of projects. I wasn't necessarily being the individual's managers in many of the situations. And there's a difference between being that team lead. So it's guiding a group of people, as I was noting. A lot of the times, different people report to different people for their management structure and hierarchy. Versus being the program lead. In many cases, I've been a program lead, and I started that in my 20s. The first few times, I will be honest, there's a few people who are very resistant to it, people who, 20 years my senior, and I've got this experience and I know what I'm doing. And I've had the benefit of having some great managers who, if they saw the conflict arising, would tell me, hold for 1 second, I'm going to have a conversation before you need to have this conversation with the person. And they would help with the blocking and tackling. I, again, stored that in the back of my head for if I become a manager, I want to be able to do that for somebody on my team because that's something that they're not ready for. And this was so helpful for me. But with the team lead piece, it's figuring out how to get a successful delivery of something. You may not always run each one of these people's schedules or timelines. So it's being that program or project manager, and you have to deliver a successful result. And usually for me, with these marketing pieces, it was to an event or to a point. So it was going to have a final point and stop. There was a put up or shut up moment that will happen for every single thing that I touched. And you will know if you succeeded or you failed because it happened or it didn't. And if it didn't, then we have another problem. And that's another conversation you'll have with your actual manager. It's learning how different people work, how best to communicate with people became one of my biggest challenges. And so as that team lead, I was learning certain people, they take criticism or feedback a certain way. When they chime in about something, they're very shy in a large group setting, while others are very loud in a group setting. So how do you take feedback from the very loud person who's taking up the most space in the room when somebody who is very quiet might send you an email afterwards or have a one-on-one conversation because they were not comfortable saying that in front of 20 other people, and then equating one person's feedback to you directly with the other person who 20 other people heard. Being able to hear the different levels of voices as a manager of a program or a project or a team became one of the challenges that I got really excited about, because I knew so many people. I would watch them and they were geniuses when you would put them on a stage or get them speaking to people, but they would get in these stuck quagmires when they were talking to their managers because they didn't know how to speak to that one individual. Seeing that process and going, I don't want to be in that situation. And I also don't want to be the manager who doesn't let that person who's a rock star shine because I didn't know how to make them look better or get seen in the best way possible. A lot of things were like taking a voice of a quieter person and going, okay, this is everybody, so you know, and I might send an email to the whole team after the meeting, after having the conversation and going, this is where we decided, but also I'm bringing this other piece in because this team member brought up this really valid point. Most people wouldn't poo-poo on that one, but they would sit there and go, okay, this is how this person's going to bring in feedback. And it became a learned process to how to work together. And you could see certain teams get really odd about it because a lot of times the loudest person in the room is the one that gets heard the most. And that's the way that you always go. But when they realized that sometimes there was a benefit to the other quieter voices actually having a say or letting them own a piece of something in a different way and letting their creativity shine in a new way that maybe would have been squashed down in a bigger group so that everybody had something that they had ownership of. There was more pride, and that allowed the team to do more things better because they were willing to do it that way. And it was a lot of fun.
Did that get you to the point where you were comfortable looking for a people management position?
I think I was always looking for a people management position, but being a woman in tech, which we may get to later, there's a tendency that if you're not already qualified to do the job that you're taking on, you don't apply for the job that you're taking on that you really want.
Can you explain that a little bit more?
I don't know the exact number, so I'm going to embarrass myself a bit, but there is statistical data out there that says, I believe, on the average, if there's a job description and a man sees it and a woman sees it, if a man sees it and says that they have at least 20% of that role that they know, they're willing to apply for the job. For the same level, a woman feels that they need to have at least 90% of that criteria already under their belt before they're willing to apply. So a lot of times when women are applying, they're doing it a little bit slower. They're being a little bit more tentative about what they're doing because they think they have to have everything lined up before they go for it. And that is one of the reasons why it's been harder for a lot of women to get into those upper managerial positions, because they don't push because they think they're not supposed to unless they're already perfect for it. I think there's a little bit more bravado that comes from a lot of guys where they're like, I want that, so I'm going to go for it, versus a woman who says, I'm qualified for it, so I will go for it. And one's a lot harder to do than the other.
Thanks. That's a really terrific explanation of that.
No problem. And that was one of those other pieces. I was on a team that was half men, half women, and everybody had their very different communication styles. So as I was going, I was starting to realize that the women amongst themselves, if they were talking, they would be very collaborative and creative together. But if you put them into that other situation, they would be the quiet ones who wouldn't say it in front of that group, but they would say it amongst themselves. So figuring out how to be the voice willing to come over the top and say, such and such has an idea, or such and such has this approach, let's look at all of them together, became my superpower, sort of. And it didn't have to be me, right? If anybody else put a new idea on the table, let's at least look at it, because even if it wasn't the perfect idea, it's going to spur on ideas from others that maybe leads to that perfect idea or a better idea than just the one that was shouted out the loudest. That's where I started to learn the team management skills, where it was really about how do I lead a group of people? And then the actual people manager skills came once I actually got to that position.
If you were going to highlight that someone had an idea who was on the project team or the program team, did you go and ask that person if it was okay to just toss that out there and say it was their idea? I mean, were people uncomfortable with that being traced back to them in those sort of situations? Was that even a challenge?
I'll be honest, I think the first time I did it, I didn't even question it. I just put it out there because that person was not comfortable speaking up in a lot of these situations. I went back afterwards and said, was it okay? Did I do something that I will regret and you hate me forever? And we're still friends, so it's okay. And I would have that one-on-one with those individuals. And now as I'm going, when I became that team manager and actually had people reporting to me, I had those one-off conversations with them. It's like, this may happen. Are you okay with this? And I would have those conversations beforehand so that if I had a one-on-one with somebody, it's like, is it okay if I bring that to the team? Is this happening? Did you know that this is something that more people need to know about? I didn't do it all the time at first, but I usually did it with something where it was very pertinent. And if something didn't happen soon, we would go in a direction that we could not come back from. So it was make the decision, go fast, and stop, put the thought point here before we've spent the money and can't come back from it. That's usually how I would run with that group. But as I started to take on different managerial roles, it changed up a little bit.
It's such an interesting balance, right? Because especially at the kind of ideation phase in any kind of group, the more ideas, the better.
Mm-hmm.
Coming up with ideas is one phase, and then judging ideas is a different phase.
You think so?
It should be.
It should be. And it absolutely should be. You'll go into a room with 20 people and say, we're brainstorming. And that's actually something I've noticed. If you go into a room with a lot of people and there's different levels of role within that room, if I'm not at the bottom, I try not to talk first. There's a power with having a title or having an experience or what have you, where if you say, this is my idea, some people who are junior might go, oh, that's the idea, not this is an idea. You might have a director or something along those lines get up there and say something just to get the ball rolling. Unfortunately, for some, they think because it's said by this level of person, they must know what's right. So my opinion won't matter. And it's really important if you are given that opportunity to set up those moments where you let more junior people throw up ideas first, because then we can spin off of those and they're not afraid to participate at that level because everybody's on equal footing. If you come in and somebody said, like the VP goes, we're going to talk about this and this is what we are trying to do. Nobody's going to question that that's what we're trying to do because the VP said it. Or very few people will question what someone's saying. Sometimes I would be that person. Sometimes I get stomped on for doing it, but it's okay. I knew that I was in a safe space and I wasn't stressed out about it, but other people would go, you questioned what this person said. I'm like, yeah, because I actually did have a question. It's the time to do it. If I was doing this when we're like, we've already agreed this is where we're going, and now I'm questioning, that's a problem. But if we're still trying to figure it out or trying to suss out what the goal is, throw everything up then and don't be afraid. And I would encourage, if I was doing this with one of my teams, I would always start asking other individual contributors first, where do you think you're going? Or what, where should this go? What is your idea? What problem do you see with this? Give them a space to critique somebody else, or give them a space to critique somebody who's more senior to them, even if they have the same title. Because a lot of times, again, it's this experience means this. And some people put a lot of value and weight to somebody else who has age years on them, and vice versa. I know people who are my age who I've put in my time, so I know this and I'm right. And the world is changing all the time. And somebody who is looking at it with fresh eyes may have a better approach. And there's nothing wrong with listening. Even if you disagree with them, hear it out first and then decide, is it worth what they said worth it? I think a good manager and a good team lead or project lead can provide a lot of space for more contribution. So you don't get stuck in this is how we do things. I think that is one of the challenges of being at a bigger company. Because you're working with a matrixed organization and a big machine, you gotta do all these steps and all these processes. But sometimes if you don't stop and look at the machine, you can't figure out how to change it, and you will be left behind by these small, nimble organizations. So being able to listen to a fresh idea, somebody who hasn't seen it from that perspective, ask the person who's been at the company the least time in the room. It's like, hey, this is all new to you. How do you see this? What does this mean to you? And it could be, wrong. It could be completely wild. It could be genius, or it could be very basic, but it could open up a topic or a line of questioning that can lead you to a better result. And there's never a harm in asking that early. There may be harm in asking late, but it's never harmful to do it early.
I really like the idea of providing the safe space for people to give feedback, put in ideas. Did you find that sending out, here's what we're going to do and here's what was added by so-and-so, made them more apt to speak up in future conversations?
Absolutely. I think giving credit to concepts, or like, this idea came out this way. If it was like just a jumble, it's just a jumble. But especially if something was added after that open discussion, a lot of people will go, you just wanted to put in your pet ideas that you just didn't bring up earlier. Mm-hmm. So I want to make sure that people know that somebody who might have been quiet in the room was participating. This is just how they chose to participate. It's different, and it's okay to be different. Some of the best, and it seems like a time suck, but it really isn't, going through the how people interact with each other steps. If you have those types of tools available to you in your organization, just to see like, how does this person like to be communicated with? How do they like to communicate to people? And understanding that process really can make a huge difference in how a team functions. I've been on very dysfunctional teams. I've been on very, very streamlined teams, and, very smooth. Everybody works and does their piece. But one of the teams that I was on, and it was actually recently, it was a great team. Everybody loved each other, working as individuals with each other. Everybody got along, but there were some communication challenges. And we went through this process and learned that certain people, even if they were quiet people, they communicated in a different way than you expected them to. So when they said something in a certain tone, it wasn't with negative intent. This is just how it came out. Everybody started to realize, oh, this person's saying this because of this reason, and that's how they're saying it because of this reason. It took the edge off of how they communicated. It kind of became a love fest. It was almost surreal. Being able to sort of break down those barriers a little bit really made a huge difference as to how everybody worked with everybody else. And people who didn't work directly with those individuals felt more comfortable talking to other people in that wider team as well. So I had a couple people who were more junior and reported to me, and they were terrified of not going through the chain of command. They would talk to me to confirm this, or they would go sideways, but they would never go up and over to another part of the group. And by saying like, oh, this is how this person works, and it's okay to talk to them this way, they were able to make these bridges, and they were able to get things done faster, and they felt much more confident about what they knew and how they could interact with other people way faster than we ever would have if we didn't have that conversation.
It sounds like really good advice for the manager who's about to take over managing a team.
Yes, especially if you're taking over a team that already exists. If you build the team, you know the players on your team. You kind of know what you're bringing into a group. If you are not building the team and you're inheriting a team, setting a level playing field for how people talk to each other is very helpful so that everybody understands the communication process.
Absolutely. When you sought out the manager role eventually, from project and program lead and team lead to manager, did you feel at that point you were at the 90% qualified? Was there some doubt?
I had no doubt at that point. I'll be honest, I did not stress when I became a manager, and I kind of kicked myself for not trying it earlier. Mm-hmm. But I'm in customer advocacy and customer references. It's a fairly flat organization. There isn't a lot of stratification that happens in one of those groups. Becoming a manager of people, it's hard to move up when everything's pretty flat. Your responsibility changes. Maybe you mentor more, or you guide more, or you're seen as an expert by more people, but you're rarely moved to a different layer of management because it's usually a fairly flat organization.
So you sought it out to go for it, or did somebody say, hey, Erin, you should go for it?
I think I'd been talking to my manager. They actually gave me a promotion, but it wasn't necessarily to manage people. And they said, what other things do you want to be doing? It's like, I want to have a team. And it's not because I need more people necessarily to do everything that I'm doing, but I think that I've picked up rapport and skills that I could help others navigate these things in a more meaningful way. And I can help somebody else. That's why I wanted to be a people manager. I've had some absolutely killer managers in the past who were great mentors. They walked me through the processes, even when they're swamped. I got to watch how they did blocking and tackling, or how they were being that strategic thinker, and watch the process and also talk through with them on that process to understand, like, this is why we're doing it this way. This is how this happens. So I could understand the tactics behind the strategy, so that it got easier for me when I was ready to make those moves where I felt like I was comfortable making all of them. And I also watched people who were managing other people. Not everybody is cut out to be a people manager. I think there's a lot more people who could be amazing, like thought leaders or individual contributors, and there's no harm in that. And a lot of tech companies have realized some of the people who are genius level individuals are not designed to have a team of 50 report to them, because that takes them away from what they're amazing at. So they have these new individual contributor roles that are just brilliant and wonderful. But for me, I realized that there's only so many things that one human being can do at a time. And I think I've picked up the skills and the abilities to actually be able to help others, even if what they're doing is not my expertise. I don't have to train them in my image. I just have to be able to give them the space and the tools so that they can do what they're going to be good at. And I'd also seen very bad managerial conversations happen where I would talk to a person's manager and they said, oh, this is what happened in the conversation. And I had a conversation with the person who they had a reprimand. They might have said something, you need to fix this. This is what's going on. And they were never aware that they had a problem because it had never been conveyed to them in a way that was straightforward enough that they knew that there was an issue. In a space where people don't want to be the bearer of bad news, sometimes it's okay to be the bearer of bad news. You have to actually just say it. And it was amazing, actually, a great conversation with somebody who took on a role, and somebody told me, you're taking this person on. They've been having a couple challenges. Help them through this. I'm like, great. And I talked to them about the role, and they're like, oh yeah, this is going great. And they say I'm doing this and this is working wonderfully. I'm like, actually, let's pause. These are your challenges right now, and this is how it's being perceived. I am not saying that it's wrong, but you need to learn how to communicate your successes and the gaps more effectively, because nobody else but you knows this right now. And it's not being articulated in a way that people feel that you own this. So we kind of walk through the tactics of it. And then I walk through with them, like, how are you articulating this to your managers? And they're like, I'm just telling you we're good. It's like, you can't do that. Until they know that you are the expert, they won't necessarily believe that saying we're good means anything. So you got to prove first that you get it. You understand the metrics the way that they need to see the metrics, and show them repeatedly that you're delivering these results. And then after that, if they see the pattern, then you can say we're good. And they know that that means that you got all of these metrics down and we're set. These things are happening and you're set. But until you can articulate and speak it in the same language, that's not how it's being seen. The person was like shocked, actually shocked for a minute. And I'm like, I'm going to give you a minute to process, because I don't think you've ever had this kind of conversation before. Half an hour later, it came back and talked a little bit more. It goes, thank you for telling me, because I did not know. We worked out a plan, corrected the issues, and the person's a rock star. They needed a kick in the pants to be said, like, how you're doing it isn't being seen as what the result is that they were expecting. Let's figure out how to fix it. I try to get in there and stop things early so that we don't have to have the swift kick in the pants conversations. But if you see something, say something. I'll send a note after a meeting saying, you kind of were, this was a little bit harsh, or did you think about this? Or you left a gap where you could have tooted your own horn about how amazing this thing was that you've been doing. Don't make me say it. You say it, because if I say that the team is doing this or you're doing this, they'll give me credit. I don't want the credit. You need the credit. Say it out loud in front of people. That kind of guidance was something that I had a lot of fun with, being able to manage people. Because even people who were peers, age-wise and career-wise, sometimes they needed to be reminded that they need to promote themselves in front of others so that the whole team looks stronger. Otherwise, it's Erin's a leader and Erin does these things. And then there's the rest of the people. It's like the rest of the people are why I'm a leader, because they're doing all these amazing things. And these are all the amazing things that they're doing. Give yourself credit. Don't just say, this happened. Say, I helped this happen, or this happened because I did this work, and show the work. A lot of times people think that, especially in customer advocacy, there's a story out there and it magically appears because it exists. And the story is out there, but it doesn't magically appear. It needs to be identified and found, and the champion needs to be given the space to tell the story. And then you need to figure out how to shape that and make it into something that's amazing for others. It may be 99% fully formed, but it's those extra pieces that you bring in or the placements that you bring in that make it work. A lot of people were not taking the credit because their job is to lift up somebody else. But sometimes they need to lift themselves up too in the process. Being able to help people toot their own horn was one of my favorite parts of being a manager.
I really liked your approach with that difficult conversation by saying the words, I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just telling you how it's being perceived over here. And I don't think that's what you want.
I've seen people say, this is wrong. Well, you're not telling them why it's wrong, or you're not giving them what wrong is, or you're not telling them what right is. So if you're not giving them a context to work in, it's really making sure that you just set the ground and show them this is what is there. This is what people see. And this is what you're trying to do, right? Are you doing that? Then show them. And if you're not doing that, how do we get you to that point so that you can show them? Because we know that's what you want to do. There's a lot of people who are great at promoting other things, but they're not great at promoting themselves. For a long time, I was in that boat because it freaked me out to think I could talk about myself as a positive, because that's bragging, and you're supposed to be humble and you're supposed to be behind the scenes. When you do event marketing, you're putting somebody else on the stage and making them shine, right? So why would you talk about what you're doing? But you don't move forward if you don't talk a little bit about it. So it helps.
This touches a little bit on this concept of personal branding that we've talked in the past about before. In fact, I think we probably talked to another marketing person who really underlined, the importance of this for us. I feel like really it's what we've been talking about for the last, few minutes, but, really I wanted to get your take on it.
Well, it depends. If you think about what a brand is, it's supposed to be the feeling you get when you perceive something. If you think about the biggest logos in the world, that brand means something. When you see that logo, there is a instant emotional reaction to that. A personal brand is, what does this person mean to you in context of work? Straightforward. Everybody's got one, whether you want one or not. This is something I actually built out for myself during COVID. It's kind of weird. And I didn't realize I was doing it. I was going through a lot of personal craziness along with COVID because lockdown isn't enough. Being a mom with a kid at home, going through personal stuff during COVID, and everything was on display because everybody's working from home. It takes a lot of effort to have your business persona and your home persona. And I realized that I was putting up a lot of effort to separate them. Most people like the person, but the business one was a little bit more quiet. So I stopped trying to separate that and just be more present, more me, not trying to, I must be polished, I must be quiet, I must do this, I must do that. That's what's supposed to be. And also in the advocacy side, at some points in my career, I was told, this is what professional looks like. This is what approachable looks like. I kind of scrapped it and said, I think I'm good at my job because the people that I work with appreciate my candor. They appreciate my sense of humor or my approachability. Just do that and be that all the time. Why try to be something else if it's working? When I realized that I didn't have to separate those parts as much, I'm not going to go parading my child around and show him, I'm so proud he, can write the letter A or whatever. That wasn't going to be part of my brand, but bring more of who I was as a person and that personality with me for all parts of my job. and that was okay. Once I started to do that, I actually felt a lot more comfortable, and being more comfortable meant that I was more approachable by more people, and I was able to do my job better. It took less effort. I realized that what people said was professional was just being in a box, and I kind of threw the box out. I mean, there's certain things I won't say at work because it's not okay to say certain things at work, but it also, that's just society. It has nothing to do with the job. So once I realized that I could be that and be more frank and be more approachable and be more present as a person, I was able to have better conversations with my coworkers on my team, as well as the sales teams that I'm working with, because I was more candid. I was more open. And when talking with the customers, I'm like, they're in the same boat. And when my brain clicked as, this customer isn't this magical thing in a box, it's a person first. I was like, oh, Joe likes pepperoni pizza and he prefers Domino's over Little Caesars. Noted. So I, start a conversation with that information. Knowing those things and bringing that in as part of a conversation made it easier to have the conversation where I wasn't worried about, I'm going to approach you only about these things. It also made that person feel seen, so that when I asked them for something, I wasn't asking, as this role, I am asking you as this role to do this thing. And then there was all this formality. If I'm asking, me, Erin, is asking you, Bob, to do something, are you in? And I'm doing it in a fairly casual way, they felt more comfortable because they were saying yes to me. They weren't saying yes to this process and all these other things. The process they knew came with it. They know comes with it. But it makes it easier to have the conversation, easier to do the next step if they're talking to a person as opposed to a role. Once I figured that out and let it go, my job got so much easier and I got better at it too.
And I'm sure other people noticed, whether they told you about it or not.
I hope so. I mean, you met me around that time frame, so you've only dealt with this part of me. So.
I definitely noticed you were doing something that was working.
And the fun part is, or the funny thing is, I've been able to maintain this. So we need to make this ask. It's going through this channel. This is what needs to happen. Sometimes I'll pipe in and just do it in a different way, even though it's the same people who would normally be having that conversation, because I did it in a slightly different manner or in a more casual or a more approachable ask. It turns into a yes from I don't know. I'm not sure if I can do this. It takes doubt out. Anytime I can do that to help somebody get their story out in the world, I'm in to help that.
It sounds like you're talking about injecting the human relationship and the personal relationship into, what is ultimately a business process to kind of maybe remove some of the friction. If you just are talking about like organizational cogs, like interacting with each other, there's a lot more friction.
Absolutely.
We're not machines, right? And the organization is not a machine. It's made up of people.
I hope not. I'm not AI yet. So until that happens, I think I'm okay. I think if people realize that they're working with a person and that person has thoughts, feelings, and emotions, you are more beholden to act. If given the opportunity, I'd rather have the conversation in person. I'd rather have it on Zoom than on the phone, because I can see your reaction or you can see my reaction and you know that I'm being genuine. You can't fake real. You can try. You can be the best actor in the world. You can know how to cry on command or whatever. But there's a falsehood to it. And I'd rather just be genuine, make an ask, or connect with somebody, and it'll work better. It's helped me maintain more meaningful work relationships over the years, my whole career, quite honestly.
So I don't think we said this word during our discussion with Erin, but she definitely used empathy as a skill when compiling all that feedback from different members of her team who may or may not feel comfortable speaking up in meetings. I really think that this discussion pairs nicely with episode 278 with Marnie Coffey. In that discussion, Marnie talked about her greatest skill being empathy and how she used it to create inclusive teams. I think Erin is doing something very similar, and I love that. And also, the way Erin focused on team communication and improving that really was a big focus, even as a team lead, on developing the people around her. And that's exactly the focus of a team lead, according to Marnie Coffey. So if you go back to the Marnie Coffey series after you've listened to 278, listen to 279 when she became a team lead, and I think you'll hear some similarities. So if you do have aspirations of becoming a team lead, we've heard multiple instances of people saying it's about getting a team to do something, produce a result, but you have to develop the people you work with in the process of doing that to be successful. And I know we talked a lot about communication styles, how to optimize the communication of a team. Even if you're not a team lead or a manager, you can still figure out the best way to communicate with people by just asking. This can apply to your boss, your coworkers, even people you manage if you're already a manager. Brad Pinkston told us way back in episode 84, one of the first questions he asks a new manager is how they like to be communicated with. So I think just by asking people, and you could come at it from the standpoint of, hey, I want to make sure I'm communicating with you in a way that is effective, that resonates, that you can best understand. And we can take in some of the suggestions that Erin talked about with changing her personal brand. So you can be genuine in your communication, and don't be afraid to show some of your personality in those conversations. It can create better and stronger connections with people that you interact with and make the communication better, in addition to figuring out how to best communicate with them. We heard a lot of motivations for becoming a people manager in that episode that I collected for you here at the end. Helping other people avoid mistakes that she has seen. Erin saw a lot of people make different mistakes. She wanted to help people avoid those. She wanted to make sure that people got credit for the work they were doing and that they could communicate the work they were doing to their management in a way that the manager would understand that they were doing the job and doing it very well. She works in customer advocacy, right? Some of the work she's doing is getting employees to advocate for themselves and tell the story of the work that they did to produce an outcome. Hopefully, we're doing this in some form during one-on-ones with our manager. One of the prerequisites to that is making sure that we document our accomplishments, document the work that we're doing so that we can communicate it in one-on-ones. And of course, we'll have it for things like resumes, LinkedIn, to demonstrate our experience in the work that we've done. Erin was paying attention to what her managers did really well, like the blocking and tackling or going and having difficult conversations with people on an employee's behalf. And she also paid attention to what some did not do well. Again, that focus on development of the people. I do think this episode pairs nicely with episode 244 with Tim Crawford. He talked about that decision point between individual contributor and people manager, and I think that's an extra set of considerations to add to Erin's motivations for pursuing people management. If you enjoyed this discussion with Erin, could you do me a favor and rate us 5 stars? Consider writing a review for Apple Podcasts. We'd sure appreciate it. I look forward to sharing part 3 of Erin's story with you next week.
Farewell, listeners. Tune in next time as the journey continues. I'm John White at BJourneyman, for Nick Cordy at NetworkNerd_, signing off.
Adios.